I see Shane's on here, Shane Sykes, Eli S is on here, which I know they spend hours upon hours in the field using Echelon on the iPad. So as I go through this, if y'all have anything that y'all want to add, or if anybody else has anything they want to add who use the iPad a lot with Echelon, feel free to speak up and give us your tricks of the trade as we go through this. So let me see if I can get over. Do y'all see my screen? Someone give me a yay or nay.
Yeah, I see it.
Perfect. Thanks, Heath. The one that says. All right. So a couple things to get started. Just very basic stuff that really doesn't have to do with the Echelon app to start with, but it's really is what version of iPad are you running? If you go to your settings button and you click on, if you click open up settings, you go down to general and you click about on your iPad. We want to look at this software version right here. It shows I'm running software version 14.3, which is the latest version of the iOS software, Apple software. We want to make sure your iPad's at least updated to a 12.3 version for an Echelon to run correctly. So go in and check your iPad version and make sure it's at least updated to a 12.3. If it won't update to a 12.3 because it's several years old, it's time to look into getting a new iPad to replace that iPad. That means your iPad's probably 4, 5, 6 years old and it's getting to the near end of its life. So I encourage you to go ahead and get a new iPad if it won't update past the version 12.3. Also, if you've never downloaded the Echelon app before, if you'll go to your app store on your iPad and you'll click the search button down here in the bottom right hand corner, and it'll bring up this search bar towards the top. If you'll click on this and you'll type in the Echelon AG, and search for it, this is the app that will come up, and it'll say download right here. Since mine's already downloaded, it gives me the option to open it. If you haven't updated your app in a while, it'll also say update right here, and you can update your app. Okay, so once you get that going, and you go ahead and you click on your Echelon Ag app, it's going to go through a download. It's going to go through a download session. And that takes several minutes to do, and I'm not going to do that in this training because I don't want to just take up time you just watching this app download. But like I said, it'll take 3, 4, even 5 minutes depending on how much information you have in your system and in your cellular or Wi-Fi connection that you have. But once you go through all this and you get it downloaded, this is the first screen that you see as you come in here. And what you'll notice is, let me back mine out a little bit. You'll see a list of your growers. And if you look up here in the center thing, you'll see growers, farms, fields, and plantings. Once you log in, you'll see a list of all your growers right here. If you don't see a list of all your growers right here, there's a couple different things we can look at. The first thing we're going to look at is top right-hand corner, this 3-bar icon, or what we call our hamburger icon, sort of similar to the desktop. We can go down here and click our favorites button. And what that'll do, that'll download a list of growers in our location, and we can select the growers that we want to see specifically. And it'll take mine just a minute because I have every grower in our division. So give it 1 second because I've already made the mistake and pressed the button. So you can go down here and you've noticed, like I said, I've got every location in here. You can go down here and you can select the growers. Let's go back up here to the Salemburg location. Because that's what I sort of use as my home location to house all my test data. You can go in here and you can select multiple growers that you want to see and you can save it. Or you can unclick this enable favorites button and it'll download every grower you have at your location. Also, last session we looked at creating new growers on the desktop, new growers, farms, and fields. If you created a new grower on the desktop, it will not automatically sync over to your iPad. You must reset your user on your Echelon app. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Again, go back to your top right-hand corner, hit this 3-bar icon. Down here, you'll see a cloud that says connected. If you'll select that cloud, you have a few different options. You have the sync now, compact database, or reset user. If you've created a new grower through the ARS import on your desktop, you will need to hit reset user on your Echelon app to get that grower to pull over. I'm not going to do that right now because I do not want to go through that data download. If you create a new farms or fields and they don't come over, you don't have to reset your grower. You just have to hit the sync now button, and that'll try to push everything from the desktop over to your iPad. This should come over seamlessly without having to do this when you create new when you create new farms, fields, plantings, and target events. You shouldn't have to go in and hit sync now, but every now and then it will get hung up, and if you don't see the things you created, you can come in here and force that data to come over. Okay, so let's get going right here. If you notice when you log in, you'll see Nutrien in your location in the top left-hand corner. Just like on the desktop in the training we did last week, this is our gray toolbar that we're going to work off of. On the desktop, it's in the bottom left-hand corner, but on the iPad, it's in the top left-hand corner. If we'll hit this scope icon, it gives us that toolbar, that side toolbar, and here's our magnet or horseshoe button pointing down. We're going to select this button also, and it points it to the right, and that locks everything in. What you'll see is the hierarchy, and I'm not sure how everyone's is set up, but mine, I have Nutrien US Corporate. Then I have access to the East region and the South region. If you'll green checkmark the South region, then green checkmark your division, which hopefully by end of the month, it'll all be updated and it'll have one Carolinas division hierarchy. But if you'll green checkmark it, then you hit the down arrow button and you should just see your location here. Now, like I said, I have access to every location in the division, so I see everybody's. Then you'll come down here and green checkmark your location. Once you green checkmark your location, it'll populate all the growers that you have favorited in that location. If we hit the down arrow button from here, we can go in and we can select the grower that we want to work with and go from there. If you notice, if I'm selected on the location, my new grower button down here is grayed out. And there is no ARS import button. We cannot add any new growers on the iPad. It all has to be done through the desktop. So we're not going to focus on adding new growers because we did that last week on the desktop. What we're going to focus on is farms, fields, plantings, and just basic navigation of the app. So if we select our grower, and if you notice, once I have my grower selected, I have several farms in here already. If I want to view one of these farms, what I do, I can come over here on the left-hand side, or I can come to the center of the screen. It's really preference. And you can hit this little 3-bar button here, and you can hit the information button, and it'll show you about this field or this farm. So it shows, hey, this is my demo farm, and the only thing it shows me is if I have a center marker dropped on this farm, and I can change the name. I can delete this farm from here, I can cancel anything I've done, or I can save it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. I also can go from here and hit this 3-bar icon. I can edit this farm. I can get driving directions to this farm, and I can add a field right here from this pop-up. But the easiest thing that I want to show to do is when creating farms is just bottom right-hand corner. We hit new farm. Once we do that, what we're going to do when we're creating new farm on the iPad, we just really give it a name, and that's it. We don't worry about dropping a center marker on the iPad. So if you'll just give this a name, and we'll call this training for. Any questions so far? So once I've given this farm a name, I'm going to save it. If you notice, it puts it down here in my list on both sides. Then from here, if I want to start to map fields under this farm, what I can do here, I can go down here and select this training farm on my left-hand side. And if you notice, it comes up, once I select it, it comes up blank because it gives me my fields tab. If I need to go back and view another farm, I can come back to my grower and select my grower, or I can just come over here and I can just select the farm that I want to view. So if I select the grower, I can go back here and select farms, and it'll give me a list of all my farms. Or I can simply just go over here and say, hey, you know what? I was on the training farm, but now I need to go over and look at the Miller farm. I just select the Miller farm, and it pulls up those fields. Okay, so let's go back and select the training farm again. So once I'm on this farm, if you notice, it's blank here in the center because there are no fields because I'm on the Fields tab. I can select New Field in the bottom right-hand corner. So once I do that, it'll automatically pull up really where your location is. If it does not, it's no big deal. You can just go over and search to the place where you want to map. So if you want to map fields under this, you can take your two fingers and you can touch this, or really your one finger and touch the screen, and you can move around anywhere you need to be so you can start to map these fields. And I'm literally just going to come over here because I see this field here, and I'm going to work on mapping these fields. You know, all I'm doing is I'm taking my two fingers and I'm pinching outwards or inwards to zoom in and out. So once I have that field up, then I'm going to map it. There's a few different ways we can map, and it's sort of very similar to the desktop. What we want to do in the bottom left-hand corner, we have this pointer icon. We want to select this pointer icon, and the first one we're going to look at is this polygon. We can select the polygon. Just like the desktop, we can tap and point around, except instead of our mouse, we're going to use our finger. What I encourage you to do, take your index finger and tap one time in the corner where you want to start mapping. Then from there, every time you want to drop a point, just take your finger and tap on that map where you want to drop that point. And just tap around the boundary. So once we have our boundary in there, what we can do, bottom left-hand corner, come back in here and hit the selector button. And of course, gotta love technology. Did not hold. Let's try this one more time. That's exactly what. Okay, so once we have that, again, if you just saw, if I tap a point where I don't need to go over here, I can come over here and hit this back button. And here's I guess the most important thing I should have said the first time, where my mistake come in. We've got to hit the finish button. Once we hit finish, it'll automatically trace that boundary for us. Once we have this boundary in here, and if we need to edit this boundary, you can tap inside this icon, and you can come over here, and it gives you different points that you can look at. So we can come over here and zoom in and say, hey, you know what? This point right here, we need to move it closer to the road. And it'll move it for you. And you can really hone in and get your boundaries as precise as you need them to. So once you have them where you need them to, tap outside the boundary again, and it updates everything. If you need to come in here and delete a point, say once you've already mapped our boundary, you can come here and select that point and make sure it check marks, and you can hit the delete button. And it'll delete that point, and it'll connect it to the next black point. Again, if you want to undo this, hit the undo button. And it brings it back. So once we have our boundary like we want it, we need to come over here and give this boundary a name. One thing we want to look for, make sure we have the farm we're under. You cannot change the farm because it's grayed out, but we can give this a name, and we'll call this Field 1. And once we're done giving a name, we hit done. The code already populates. We want to make sure our acres are right. 7.93 acres are updated. We're in North Carolina in Columbus County. Here's our longitude and latitude, and any other information we want to put in. We want to make sure everything is gray here. If we get a orange or error button, we need to go back and we need to review and make sure everything is everything's connected on here. Our boundaries are correct like they need to be. So once we're done with this, we can hit save. If you need some advanced information, you can go and put that in, your soil texture, water holding capacity, all of that sorts in nature. So from here we hit save. So once we do this, it brings us back to our main screen under this training farm, back to our fields page. From here we can hit new field again. And it brings us back to where I am, and I can go back and find my farm again. And we can begin to map again. Again, bottom left-hand corner, hit this pointer icon. If we can also do circles, so if we're doing pivots, you also have the ability to do a pivot. I'm gonna select this. I'm gonna select the pivot, and the way you do this, you zoom in to over top of your pivot. You tap in the center of that pivot is, and it automatically puts a radius around that pivot. If you need to change the size of that pivot, select this button here, this black circle here, and you can move it in or out, whichever way you need. So once we're done with that, we hit finish. If we need to edit this, we can. Maybe we need to split this this pivot out a little bit. We hit the split button, and it puts the split line in our pivot. If this is not where you need to split it, we just take these black buttons and we move it to where we need this field split. Once we have it where we want to split, we hit the split button, and it draws a line. Then from here, we can select the side we want to split out, and we can hit the trash can button, and it deletes it. Again, this is just a very basic way to map a pivot. What I prefer to do, and the most accurate thing to do of all, is GPS mapping. In order to do this, what we need to do is hit new field again, and it brings us to back where we are. And you can come over here and find the field you want to map, but if you're not in that field at the moment, I would wait till you get to that field before you hit your GPS mapping, because it's automatically going to ping your GPS. So how we do that, again, bottom left-hand corner, we'll hit our pointer icon, and we're going to hit the GPS button. And it brings us to where your GPS is, and if you notice, you're about to see my house right now. And you can tell, I mean, it's pretty accurate because I'm actually sitting, that's about where I'm sitting. My image will come back up. So what you want to do, once you get to the field and you hit your GPS, a couple different options you can do. You can hit this red record button and you can start driving around your field like you're mapping. But I'll tell you, here's what I prefer to do. If you look down here in the bottom left-hand corner, your thing will say distance or auto. If you've never messed with this before, it's going to automatically default to where it says auto, A-U-T-O. But if we select this where it's down here, it lets us go set a frequency of how often we want our pins to drop, and if we need any offsets for our mapping. So let's look at this. So I've got mine set for distance. It's going to drop a pin every 40 foot, which is not very far, and you can adjust this depending on the size of your field. If you have very big fields, you can move this up to 100, 200 foot, whatever you like. But I'll tell you, if you have smaller fields like we do in southeastern North Carolina, or even around that, we'll call it Rocky Mount, Nashville area, and really a lot of places on the western part of North Carolina where we have really small fields, we might want to move this down sometimes even 20 or 25 foot, because it'll drop that pin quicker and it'll give us a more accurate boundary. Also, what we look at is this offset button. If we look at this offset button, what is that saying is it's going to mark that point wherever that iPad is sitting. But a lot of times, if we're riding a four-wheeler or even a side-by-side, or sometimes even our pickup truck, say if we're riding in a side-by-side, that iPad's going to be in the middle of our side-by-side, or sitting in the seat beside of us. Well, if we're doing that and we're riding around that field clockwise, we're going to be off on that boundary 3 or 4 foot, because we can't get all the way to the edge of that boundary. So what we can do, we can go in here and we can set an offset to the left or to the right, depending on how you drive around your boundary, of how many ever feet we need. So if we need to offset that 6 foot from where our iPad's sitting to get to the edge of that boundary to get a more accurate boundary, then you can do that. Once you have that, you hit done. I will encourage you to check your boundaries even when you're GPS mapping. This iPad is accuracy can get up to 3 meters. So depending on the service that you have and how many satellites you're pinging off of, you could be up to 9 foot off, really 9.5 foot off or so. Then so I will encourage you to make sure these boundaries are accurate even when you're GPSing them and you got them the way you need them. So you also can invest in an external GPS. There's one called a Bad Elf Pro that's on the market. It's probably the most economical. It runs about anywhere from $150 to $200, depending on if you get them on sale or not. And that'll get your boundaries down to less than 2 meters. So that really hones in. So once we have all that, what we can do, we can go in there and have our offsets in distance requirement set. We can hit this red record button and it says recording. What you want to do, can't really get up and walk around. You want to start driving. Drive around your boundary and to get it where you need it. Once you get your boundary and you're done, you hit finish. I can't hit the finish button because I haven't moved. And what it'll do, it'll map that boundary for you. If you need to pause while you're mapping, you're recording. Say if you go in there and you have 2 polygons that you need to map, because a lot of times, let's zoom out here. This right here is one field, and this right here is one field. But a lot of times we'll map this whole thing as one big field instead of 2 separate fields. So what you can do, you can record and you can drive around this boundary and record it. Then you can hit the pause button down here and you can skip across this ditch and you can drive this boundary again, or you can hit the record button again and drive this boundary. And once you're finished, it'll give you 2 separate boundaries, but it'll still be considered one field. It just lets you break up these into different polygons and gets rid of that ditch. So once you do all that, you give this field a name. Call it whatever the field name is. Make sure the area is right, and you save it. Again, since I haven't really done anything, it's not going to let me. It's not going to give me any areas or boundaries for this one. But we'll still give it a name. Once we do that, we can save it. And if you notice, there's no boundaries in here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get rid of this field. I'm gonna hit the information or I'm gonna hit in the center of this test field, and it'll give me this information button. Or I can do it down here on my side under this training, and I can go in here and I can hit the information button, and I can delete this field. Okay, a couple other things we need to look at is once we have our fields mapped in here, or even if we've mapped them on the desktop and they come over, if we give this to one of our employees and say, hey, you know what? I need you to go to so-and-so field today. And I need you to either soil sample it, tissue sample it, scout it, whatever. Well, if that person has never been to that field and they have this iPad, they can come here and select the field they're going to or the farm they're going to. They can hit this 3-bar icon, or these 3 buttons, and they can hit driving directions, and it'll pull up your driving directions to this field. And all they have to do is show in this field is 2.7 miles away from where I'm at now. And they hit the go button, and it gives them that driving directions. Once they get there, they can hit the back arrow button and go back to Echelon. Also, another way to view these fields, and I know I'm throwing a lot at y'all. If you're just looking at the center of this screen and you see field 1 and you have no idea where it is, we can come down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and we have this, we'll call it this hamburger icon, 3-bar icon right here, or we have this teardrop icon. We select this teardrop icon, and it gives us the aerial view of this field. And it takes it just a second for my map to update. And you can zoom in and out, and if there's multiple fields, you'll be able to see multiple fields in that farm. I'll come over here and do this one. So if I want to switch to this Miller farm, once I do this, and I'm on this Miller farm, it'll show me all the fields on this farm. Then from here, if I need a new field, I can hit new field again. I can click on these fields and I can hit the information button. I can get my driving directions. I can do different things with this field. Again, it's just a different view of how you prefer to view your fields. If you like a list view, you need to stay on this 3-bar icon down here. If you like an aerial view, use your teardrop icon. Any questions so far? Okay, if not, I'm going to come back over here to this training farm and I'm going to select it. Then from here, I'm back. Once I'm on the farm level, I can add new fields. But from here, the last thing we're going to look at is adding plantings to this field through our iPad. So if we select our field 1 here on our left-hand side and we check mark it, it comes up blank and it brings us to our plantings page. We can add a new planting in here. And the way we can do that, we can come in here and this field will pull up. We can give this field a commodity. And we're going to keep it basic. We're going to do corn. Once that happens, we can come here and it's always going to default to today's date. So you can change this date to a previous date that's going to be planted or a future date. Once that's completed, we can hit the save button. And that'll save our planting. But I'm also going to show you over here, just like we did on the desktop, maybe this field's planted in two different things. You can also go in here and do split plantings on this field. Come down here and select your pointer icon, and you hit the split button. It'll automatically split this field or put a line across this field to split. If we need to change it around again, we just move it around and get it as most accurate as possible. So once we do that, we hit split and it splits it out. Then we can split out the side that we don't want to plant and it cuts it out for us. You also can do your plantings off of GPS. Again, bottom left-hand corner, if you'll just hit this GPS button, then you can ride around and you can map these plantings that way. This works really well when you're marking tobacco land and measuring tobacco land and getting the plantings right for that. Helps your growers get accurate count of how many acres they actually have when doing tobacco. So once we split this out.
Hey, Justin.
Yes, sir.
One thing I want to add about tobacco, because it's important when I'm doing it, you got to delete the boundary first, then start your GPS, or you're going to have something weird.
Okay, so good point, Shane. Thank you for that. Let me cancel this. So I'm going to hit new planting again. What Shane's saying is you need to come in here and delete this planting boundary out, then go start your GPS mapping. Correct, Shane?
Absolutely. Or what you're going to do is you're going to be taking out what you're putting in, because that's the way it works. Like if you want to take out for a pond or trees or cemetery or something like that.
Very good point. So what he's saying is, and he's exactly right. If you come in here and if you just start GPSing and this boundary is already green, it's just going to cut out an area. So we need to delete this area first, then go in and hit your GPS, and it'll remap it to where that tobacco land actually is, or however you want to split it out. If any questions about that? If there is, or if not at this time, feel free to call me if questions do arise when you're in the field actually doing this. But I'm going to split this out again. Again, I hit my split button down here. I move it around. And we want to make sure when we're splitting, these black dots are on the outside of the boundary. We don't want to make it on the inside of the boundary. So we hit split. Come over here and we hit the delete button. Select it, or the trash can button. Then we can give it a commodity. Let's say this is going to be corn. The date it was planted, and we'll go to a future date, and we're going to save it. Once that happens, that gives us our planting. If we need to do another new planting, it'll bring up the other side of that field, and maybe this is tobacco. Give the date that was planted, and it gives you the name. If you have a variety, again, you can put that variety in and go from there. You can do multi-year plantings. Say if you're planting wheat in the fall, you can do that as a multi-year and say, hey, you know what, we're going to start in season 2020, but we're going to end in 2021. And you can change that over if you need to. Again, any kind of traits or anything that you need to put in here, you can, and save this. Once you do that, if you need to view these, you can select the one you want and hit the information button, or you can come down here to this teardrop icon and it'll color code those plantings that you have. And these colors are based off of, in our Echelon, in our settings tab that I'll explain in another video or training of how we can set our custom colors for our crops. And also, if and again, once you're on these plantings, you can hit from the 3-bar icon. It'll also give you driving directions to those plantings. Any questions? Don't forget a lot of common things that a couple things that a lot of people get held up on. If they go through this, so if they're on fields and they come back to the grower and they want to add a new farm, they'll call and say, hey, I'm on the grower, but I can't see where I have a new farm button. We have to check this. We have to check this center up here and make sure we're selected on farms and not fields. So we're actually selected on the grower, but it has this peg looking at every field this grower has. And we can do this by hitting this teardrop icon and give us an aerial view. And you see I've got them all across the world. But make sure we're selected on farms once we go back to select that grower to add a new farm. Same thing with fields. If we're on that field, right here, and this planting button is selected, you won't see the new field button. Come back up here to the top and make sure it's black where it says fields. Then from here you can create new fields. If you notice, I clicked back on the grower and it took me back to my fields section. So I need to select my farms. And that'll give you a list of all your farms. Any questions before I move on to one other thing? Again, let's look back at this 3-bar icon over here. A couple different things. Data browser, your favorites. Make sure you got your favorites there. You're connected. Again, go back to where you can sync. Sync now. If you have something held up, like if you a lot of times, if you have poor service or something, you'll see this green bar icon. It'll turn red. That means you have some kind of error or something's not synced right. What you can do, come over here, hit this 3-bar icon, hit this connected, and hit sync now. And it'll say, hey, you know what? It says there's syncing in progress. There's nothing to update because mine's already updated to my desktop. But if there's something that needs to push over, it will push over. Sometimes you'll get a thing. It'll say sync. It'll say so many records sync, but with errors. And you'll see your errors right here. If you start to get these errors that pile up, call me. And I can walk you through, how to get rid of these errors and check on the back end to make sure that these errors are cleared up before it hits the desktop, or when it hits the desktop, everything's there. Because a lot of times, once we start to accumulate errors, we'll have to reset our user. And that scares a lot of people because it says, hey, this is going to remove all data from your device. But what you have to realize is, yeah, we're removing the data, but everything's backed up in the cloud. So as soon as we log back in, all that data will come back over. It will just get rid of those errors. All right, guys, y'all have any other questions or anything? Because that's pretty much it for the training. Like I said, my goal is not to take up the whole hour. My goal is to take up about 30, 45 minutes and give time if y'all have any questions or anything like that. So I guess I'll open up if anybody has any questions or anything they want me to go back over. All right. we're going once, going twice. We're sold. Guys, that's everything I had today. I'm going to stick on here for a few more minutes in case some of y'all, in case some people drop off or some people have some questions who want to hang behind. Feel free to, and we can talk. If not, don't forget, I'm always available. Reach me by email, call me. I'm more than welcome to come see y'all. I'm just not dropping by on a whim. If you call and ask me to come to your location because you need help, I will come. But with everything going on, I'm not just dropping by locations just to say hi. So I appreciate y'all guys, and if nothing else, we will see y'all next Friday.